Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Jesus went to the Mount of Olives, but early in the morning he arrived again in the temple area, and all the people started coming to him, and he sat down and taught them. Then the scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery and made her stand in the middle. They said to him, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the very act of committing adultery. Now, in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. So what do you say?" They said this to test him, so that they could have some charge to bring against him. Jesus bent down and began to write on the ground with his finger. But when they continued asking him, he straightened up and said to them, "Let the one among you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." Again he bent down and wrote on the ground. And in response, they went away one by one, beginning with the elders. So he was left alone with the woman before him. Then Jesus straightened up and said to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She replied, "No one, sir." Then Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go, and from now on, do not sin anymore." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
As a former business person, I like policies and procedures. They kind of keep things organized. Running and shooting from the hip doesn't tend to work too good. I found out, and I think God maybe he might have a bit of a business background, right? He likes to have best practices and policies and procedures in place for us to help us get our jobs done and to stay out of human resources or to stay out of the principal's office. And I think one of his main policies in governing the universe is that he always gives another chance, right? I think he must have been a golfer too, because he is very free with giving mulligans, right? He will definitely say, "Take a mulligan, take a mulligan." He doesn't like it when you cheat. That's right. He doesn't like it when you cheat, when you kick your ball out back into the fairway, or you take an 8 when you had a 12 or whatever. That's about the way I play. But it seems strange, I think, to some people to think about God as having policies. But if a policy is a consistent way of behaving and facing specific circumstances, well, then God's habit of giving us another chance, it definitely qualifies. So this is what the prophet Isaiah tells us. Through him, God explains, you guys got to excuse me, my allergies are absolutely just torturing me. "Remember not the events of the past. See, I am doing something new." God is inviting his people to look to the future with hope, right? It's not what we've done in the past. In many ways we've screwed up. It's about how we perceive and how we act and how we move going forward. And at the time that Isaiah was writing, the people of Israel, they were living in exile. They had been captured, they had been put out, they had been dragged to another country, and they were living as second-class citizens in Babylon. And they had been unfaithful to God, they had cheated, they had gone against the rules, and as a result, Jerusalem had been long time conquered, and all the inhabitants had been scattered and they were enslaved because they did not play by the rules. So there was just a very little room for hope. But in the midst of that situation, God reminds them that he has done wonders for his people in the past, and he promises to do so again, right? God punishes, or he punished, but he never forgot the Israelites. He was always there for them. Like I said, it's his policy to give a second chance. to bring them back from exile, even if they really don't deserve it that much. So Jesus follows this same policy, of course, because he trained under God and he knows all the best practices and all the policies and procedures. So notice that he doesn't ignore the sins of the adulterous woman. He doesn't excuse the sins of her. Right? That's a good boss, right? He said, if you do something wrong, I'm going to acknowledge it, and then I'm going to point it out, and we're going to address it. If you've ever had to manage anybody, or you've ever tried to manage your children, unless you point something out to them, they will continue to do the same thing. A good friend of mine told me she has children, and she always tells me to apply it to the parish. If you let somebody do something once, be prepared to let it happen for the rest of your life. So that's kind of true. Think about your children. So, but he does. So he acknowledges the sin. He acknowledges the sin. He doesn't excuse it because he says, "Go and sin no more." But at the same time, he doesn't light her up, right? He doesn't tear into her. He doesn't yell at her. He doesn't condemn her. He gives her a mulligan, right? And that's a good thing. So it's a good thing that God follows this policy with us, especially. Otherwise, how could any of us have any bit of hope in our lives? Otherwise, God would have to destroy us all, just like the Pharisees. Sorry, he didn't destroy the Pharisees, but he would have to destroy us because of the things that we have done wrong, and if we ignored them, he wouldn't get a second chance, because we're very, very, very quick, like the Pharisees, to look for flaws in others. Think about the effort they had to go through to run around to find an adulterous woman in the midst of her adultery. That takes some pretty freaky detective work, right? So when people are looking that hard to find somebody to sin, just so they could use this against Jesus, they weren't so concerned about her. They could stone her; they wouldn't care. But let's use this opportunity to prove that this guy is wrong, so we can kill him, right? That's what they're working for. So, and we're guilty of that ourselves. Think about all the times when we look at people and condemn them because of the way they look, because of the way they act, because of the way they talk, because of what television channel they happen to watch, right? That's very easy to do that. I mean, I got people coming into the confessional all the time talking about those people. Well, guess what? You people are those people to those people. Go figure it out, all right? That's just the enemy trying to set us apart. So God doesn't choose his policies randomly. He has these policies because we know they need them. Just like the church, right? The church has all these rules. When I do a wedding, I have all these rules that are set in the wedding guidelines. I tell people that they can't. They have to have church music for a wedding. And Billy Idol's White Wedding does not count as church music. But Father, it has wedding in it. No, it doesn't. It doesn't count like that. Father, can the bride wear a cowboy hat with a veil? No, she cannot wear a cowboy hat. And am I making these up? No, because all these things have happened before. So I have to have rules for it. Jesus knows that people will do stuff because He's been around. God's been around for a while. He knows the kind of stuff that we'll get into. So He knows to give us second chances because we need them, because we will fail. Just to illustrate that point, there's a famous short story by Ernest Hemingway. He tells a story of a father and a son who had become estranged, much like the prodigal son. And they had an argument, and the son ran off and ran away. And after a few days, the father went to go find him. Couldn't find him anywhere. So he searched for weeks. It turned into months. And so finally, in this last ditch effort, he said, "I'm going to put an advertisement in the most important, the most well circulated newspaper in Madrid." So he does that. The ad read, "Dear Salvador, meet me in front of this newspaper office at noon on Saturday. All is forgiven. I love you, your father." Well, Saturday, first thing in the morning, 800 Salvadors showed up looking for forgiveness from love for their fathers. I think that is a really wonderful explanation and description of how much we realize that we do fail and we do need the forgiveness of our Father. Right? We're all like Salvador. Our hearts have been wounded by the sins of others and by our own sins, and we've done the same thing to other people. So today, what God is doing is He's putting an advertisement in the liturgy to remind us to come back. You can always have a fresh start. You can always have a mulligan. I love you. Let me show my love for you. Let's start over again. And that's, like I said, that's God's policy. The Pharisees wanted to destroy the sinful woman. Jesus wanted to give her another chance. That's the difference between good and bad, right? Forgiveness and not forgiveness. So He came to earth to overcome sin and death. He came to earth to lead each one of us out of the exile of Babylon and back into eternal life, just as He had done He was going to do and lead Israel out of Lebanon. So we are Christians. We are Christ's followers. We are Christ's representatives in the world. So if we follow by the principles and policies and procedures of the Home Office, of the company that have been set up for over 2,000 years, we are responsible, just as the president showed his vice president showed his compassion to each other. God shows His compassion to His Son. That is a horrible description of the Holy Trinity, and don't tell anybody I tried to do it. But we are called to take that down. We are called to share that forgiveness and that trust. We are ambassadors of forgiveness. So we have to ask ourselves, is there someone in our life who needs another chance? Is there somebody in my life who I've given up on, who I've turned my back on? Is there somebody in my life who I've condemned, just as the Pharisees condemned the adulterous woman? Or is there somebody perhaps that I have destroyed by gossip, by criticism, by speaking about them behind their back? Some of us might have to think pretty hard for that. Some of us might think of something immediately. So others will have to also ask for God's light to remind us of those of whom we might have harmed. But let's all play by the same playbook. Let's all play by the same rules, the same best practices. So when Jesus comes to us in Holy Communion, let's thank Him for giving us second chances, for not condemning us. And let's promise Him with His grace that we too will do our best to follow His policies and procedures so that we don't end up in the ultimate human resources office.